All right, so hopefully you can hear me. If you can and you're watching this, just leave a comment. I want to see if it's going to pop up for me. All right, so we should be going live here. Yesterday we tried this and it didn't go that well. It kind of the video cut out at kind of part way through. So what I thought I'd do is I'd come on this morning and essentially tell the same story. I'll move a little bit quicker through the beginning, but basically I've been playing with some broadcasting software, and the idea is that I want to create a platform where people can come on and talk about a few different things. So the first thing that I thought about was doing client Q&A. So these would be obviously questions that I get from my clients. I've got a pretty long list of questions that I'd like to get through. And what I'll do with those is kind of curate the list a little bit. So a lot of the questions are fairly short answer type questions, but then there's a lot of questions that we can actually get a lot of detail and kind of go in depth on. So that's going to be one thing that I'd like to focus on. The second one is going to be just small business. So people who, we're operating a small business going into the quarantine. I'd like to know how they handled the quarantine and that kind of thing. And then also what their plan is exiting the shutdown and whatnot, and kind of seeing what their plan is to go forward. And then the third thing that I'd like to talk about is actually animation people. So if you're in the animation industry, I would love to talk to you as well. And the idea there is going into the quarantine, I actually think the animation industry was one of the better ones that pivoted really quickly. They quickly set up work at home studios for all of their employees and whatnot, and gave them machines and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what I'm doing with this platform. So going back to some of the questions that I get, the one I thought I would go over, I tried to go over yesterday, is this question of, how did I get started doing what I'm doing? And I kind of started right from the beginning. I'm going to do that again today. I'll just kind of fast forward a little bit. So I was born in Wolfville, Nova Scotia. Didn't live there very long. My parents moved to Alberta and then into Calgary eventually at a very young age for me. My brother was born in Calgary. The first place we lived in was just a small kind of two-story home in a little cul-de-sac. There's a bunch of kids that were out playing there that lived in that cul-de-sac. So we had plenty of friends to play with and ride our bikes around and do all that kind of stuff. And as it would turn out, one of my best friends actually lived next door to me. So I was involved with, or I guess we kind of got involved with each other, being friends and that kind of thing. And there were certain things that my parents wouldn't allow me to do. But I could go over to his house and we could watch, one of the things we watched all the time was wrestling, and then a lot of cartoons and that kind of stuff. So some of that I think played into sort of setting an early course to where I ended up. Anybody who watched, professional wrestling in the 80s knows, even the 90s, like Hulk Hogan and these guys who, they'd always have this thing about taking your vitamins and Singer Pears and that kind of thing. So I think that kind of set the scene a little bit. And then of course, watching cartoons, I watched He-Man a lot, and they would have these sort of public service announcements at the end of the show. And it was always something to do with health and fitness, make sure you're eating right and this kind of stuff. So that kind of set maybe an early seed of me getting to where I am now. And again, if you guys are watching this, if you could just write a comment. I'm trying to see if the chat feature on this thing is working. So anyway, in Calgary, we moved to a second house a little bit bigger as the family was kind of growing up. And this house is actually where I have a lot more of my kind of athletic memories. It was just down the road from a pretty large field. In the middle of this field was a hockey rink. It was completely free to use. The community took care of it. We filled it up with water so it would freeze. And then we'd just have a free kind of hockey rink that we could go play at. Boards and everything. Like it was a pretty good rink for back in the, what, I guess, 90s, late 80s. Anyway, I'd be out there pretty much all day, sunrise to sunset. Even like, the school days, the bus would drop me off. I would run as fast as I could all the way home, get changed, grab my sports gear, whatever we were going to go play, baseball, football, hockey, whatever it was, grab my stuff and run out to the field and spend the rest of the day out there. When I wasn't out there playing sports with my friends, I was basically just drawing cartoons. So I would sit down in the living room with just a stack of papers, and one of my favorite movies was 101 Dalmatians, and I would just watch that, and I'd hit pause and I'd try to draw the scenes that the movie had. So this sort of set the tone. Basically all I did for the next like 15 years was draw cartoons and play sports. In Calgary, the school system, we basically had elementary school, junior high school, and then high school. I had just started high school. Actually, I'll go back a little bit. So when I was 10, kind of realized that I was actually pretty good at playing baseball. So we had prior to that, we were playing like a lot of coach pitch and t-ball and that kind of stuff. And it was, some kids are good and some kids are pretty poor at that age. But once I was 10, that's when I started getting on a little bit more competitive teams. You had to try out to make the team. And so I would get selected to the top team. I guess that was rare for a 10-year-old. They're only allowed to take like 2 10-year-olds for this under 12 team. So I was one of them. And then I ended up making all-star teams and that kind of stuff. And we'd go on to win provincial championships, prairie championships, and then eventually we'd get to the nationals and that kind of thing. So it was fairly evident that I was good at sports at a fairly young age. And it was essentially because all I did was play sports and, like I said, draw cartoons. So moving in through school, I would always take as many PE classes as I could get. And I would also take as many art classes as I could get. So when I finished, or I guess right in the middle of high school, the family decided to move out to BC. So we moved to Maple Ridge. Oddly enough, my best friend from Calgary, who lived in the cul-de-sac next door to me, they actually moved to Maple Ridge in like grade 3, and we had stayed in contact with one another. Our families were friends, and we had family in BC, so we'd come visit them whenever we'd visit our family and vice versa. So we kind of reconnected. And then in high school, so high school is totally different out here. It was, I think it's grades 8 through 12. So I was sort of coming in at grade 11, and it was kind of a weird experience. I was definitely the odd person out, and the schools out here or out in BC were much smaller than what I was used to. So I can't remember exactly, but the high school was really, really large, and it was only 3 grades, and it had something like 2 to 3 times the amount of students that this new school had, with almost twice as many grades. So I'd go to try out for the sports teams and that kind of thing, and they essentially told me that most of the teams were already chosen. Like, they knew who was going to be on the teams. And I was like, well, I just moved here, sort of thing. I wanted to try out. And anyway, I didn't really get that opportunity, but I was able to, the track team took me. So I ran a lot of track in high school. And then a lot of the other sports were more community driven anyway. So in high school, like I said, I pretty much spent my time like drawing cartoons. I had learned somewhere probably reading an interview or something that most artists drew for like 8 hours a day. So I kind of set that as a benchmark for myself. So I just kind of locked myself in my room and I'd spend like 8 hours a day drawing, like as much as I could. And then, of course, we were playing sports as well. So we'd go off to our whatever our sports were. And for me, it was like baseball and football mostly at that time. So as you could imagine, I was fairly busy through high school. I took a morning PE class that kind of introduced me a little bit more to the strength and conditioning stuff. I had my first introduction to strength and conditioning when I was 13. Our baseball team was pretty good and really competitive, and they paired us up with a physiotherapist to kind of. So back in these days, we were still under this idea that if you work out at a young age, you might damage growth plates and that kind of thing. So they're very careful and cautious with us. But that was really my first introduction, and then I really got into it in high school with these sort of morning conditioning classes, PE classes that they would do. Then I'd have the regular school schedule, and then afterwards it was immediately after high school, the bell ended, it was off to I think it was baseball first and then football and after baseball, and then I'd come home, have dinner, and basically go to bed. So when I was done high school, I was pretty much only good at two things. I didn't have a lot of time to study. In fact, I never studied for an exam. I didn't really do any homework at all. I would try to get it all done in the class time that they gave me. So I figured, if I couldn't get the material in the 1 or 2 hours, however long the classes were, it wasn't really worth pursuing after, because I wanted to be an athlete. So I was doing that, and yeah. So when high school, so somebody is asking me to say hello to their best friend, Mike Oxford, I think it is. I'll actually do one better for you. The name here is AD7000. And I can actually pop that right up on the screen for you. So there you are. So hello, Mike. Anyway, like I was saying, when I finished high school, I was pretty much good at two things. I could draw cartoons and I could play sports. Unfortunately, in the late 90s, it was me like 98, I graduated. There wasn't much of a career in those two things. I mean, there was, if you were going into like a kinesiology program, you were either going to be a kinesiologist, a physiotherapist, or you're going to work in a gym, or become a PE teacher. So for me, I didn't want to become a teacher, although my parents really urged me to. I knew I couldn't be a physical therapist because the school requirements were too high for somebody who was also a student athlete. So I just didn't have the time to be able to put into that. And a kinesiologist was sort of a thing, but not really a thing. Somebody's asking what my favorite drink is. Right now it's coffee. So I've got my coffee right here. There you are. So yeah, so I wanted to work in a gym. I wanted to be kind of a personal trainer. And then, so when I finished high school, I had applied for basically two routes. One was the physical education route, and the other one was an animation route. And fortunately, I actually didn't get into the animation program. And that was actually important because, so I was like second on the wait list, and normally they get at least 10 people from the wait list that make it into the program. Unfortunately, that was the first year where everybody, all 20 or however many students they were taking, got accepted and, had all the I's dotted and the T's crossed, whatever. They got everything done that they needed to get done. So nobody from the wait list got on. So that was actually a blessing in disguise, because there was no way I'd be able to keep up with the workload for the animation program and pursue sports. Like I said yesterday, when I was exiting high school, me and my parents had a bit of a conversation. It was like, kind of, what should I pursue? While I was younger, I thought that I would pursue athletics, because when I get older and I couldn't play sports anymore, it might be something that I regret. So I kind of went all in on the sports thing. And it turned out really well for me. I ended up playing through college. It helped pay for college. I played for a team called the National Baseball Institute at the time, which was like Canada's premier baseball team. Um, and then I ended up doing some animation courses sort of in the off season and after I was done playing. So all of that experience led me to trying to find a job in a gym. And the first gym that I worked at, I ended up doing everything. So I was working front end. I was, swiping people in. I worked in membership sales, and then I was helping people out with their fitness programs as well. I only lasted a week at this gym because in the first week that I was hired there was a shooting, and then there was a coyote problem. So you'd leave the gym at the end of the night after closing up, you'd come out to your car and it'd be surrounded by coyotes. It was just like, man, this is too crazy. So I'm out of here. I'm going to go find something else to do. Did some kind of like remedial jobs. And then I ended up getting hired at a gym where I would spend most of my career at. Same idea. I started on like membership sales, but they let me do both. So they let me do membership sales and personal training. So this was a great route to really build my personal training business, because all of the new members that signed up, I could end up doing their sessions with them and then eventually getting them kind of signed up. So I don't know how long I worked at this gym, but I would say like probably 15 years, somewhere in the middle there. There's a lot of like really big turning points for me. One of them being I met a friend of mine. His name is Steve, and he kind of pointed me in the right direction. He never really gave me answers to the questions that I would ask him. He's a super smart guy, like one of the most intelligent people I think I've met in the fitness industry. And I would ask him questions, and he would kind of point me in the right direction, but never actually tell me what the answer was. So through him, I ended up finding a guy by the name of Mike Boyle, who is my strength and conditioning mentor right now, and he has been since. He's sort of one of the best. He's out on the East Coast. He's worked with the Boston Red Sox, Boston University, the Olympic hockey teams, all that kind of stuff. So he's super, super good. Anyway. That was one big turning point. Another big big turning point for me was I actually met my jiu-jitsu coach. So his name is Perry, and this is kind of a fun story. So he would come in, and this is around when the UFC would get more popular. He was a regular at the gym, and we would kind of talk UFC. And then one day he just said, "Hey, would you like to try it?" And I was pretty hesitant at the time. I really didn't feel comfortable, because I knew what happened at martial arts studios to guys who were fairly athletic, fairly muscular. We got beat up. I kind of felt like I was going to get picked on there a little bit. So finally, after like weeks of coaxing, he eventually got me down there. So I went down there, and I decided, I'm going to go down there. And then the second that I feel uncomfortable with it, I'm just not going to do it anymore. And I figured he'd be okay with that. So I tried it out, met some really great people, and I've been doing it ever since. I don't know how long I've been doing that. Like I must have been like student number 3 for his school. Like I was pretty much there from essentially day one. I mean, we certainly didn't have any sort of formulated program there at all. That all came later. We didn't even have gis, actually. We were just in t-shirts and shorts and all that. So eventually the program grew, and it's a really fantastic program. And jiu-jitsu is something that I really fell in love with. I'm currently a brown belt, kind of working towards just getting better at the basics with jiu-jitsu right now. That's kind of been my main focus. And then the other thing, and this was a really big one of the things that I learned coming out of that gym. So one of my friends was, we kind of shared an interest in bodybuilding. Again, I would throw that back to those cartoons that I watched when I was younger. And I kind of, after baseball, I needed something to compete in or be competitive about. So I started, something I always wanted to do was actually compete in bodybuilding as well. So I'm like, well, here's a perfect opportunity. You know, I'm friends with this guy now. He's a competitive bodybuilder. He actually ended up getting his pro card, which is really incredible. For me, it was always a hobby. It was just something I liked to do. So we worked out together. I think I did about 12 bodybuilding shows, 12 or 13 over the course of about 14 years. Now, the thing about bodybuilding, like you can look at it as a super superficial thing, but what I realized, like we were incredibly dedicated to this sport, right? And you have to be to have any sort of success, right? So we were getting up early, maybe we do a bit of cardio. We'd have all of our meals planned out for the day, like measured and calculated and all that kind of stuff. We would meet up at the same time every day to work out. And then after that, it was, a scheduled meal. Oh, excuse me. So basically everything, like all your ducks had to be in a row to be successful by any means in bodybuilding. And so somewhere around like year, probably 6, I would say, like partway through, started to make this realization that, if you could put that much effort into something that is arguably not that meaningful. I mean, you compete, there's no financial gain unless you go pro. You get a plastic trophy at the end of it. The feeling on stage is incredible, but you don't really get that much out of it for the amount of work that actually has to go into it. So if you could put that much effort, where you could plan out your entire day around a workout, or being able to eat certain foods and, get your body fat down to, incredibly small numbers. If you could put that much work into something like that, imagine what you could accomplish if you put that much determination and dedication into something that really mattered, like something more like your career, something more like, say, your family life. And so I was really playing with that idea in my head for several years. And then when I went on to kind of start my own personal training business, I had a packet. And this is actually something I would recommend people doing, is you actually write a business plan. So I obviously had to do this because I was starting a business, but for an individual, it's a really good idea to kind of just go down to your government buildings, grab the small business package and work your way through the business plan, but do it from a life standpoint. Like look at your life as if you're going to run a business, and they're going to ask you some really challenging questions. And one of the questions that I kind of got hung up on was, what is your business about? What would what service are you providing? So, I mean, that was easy. Well, I'm working people out. I'm exercising people. But as I looked at the question, I was like, well, it's kind of a little bit more than that. It's actually not just working out. I mean, that's sort of the surface level thing that we're doing. Like if you were to peer through the window, yeah, you'd see people working out, but that's not really what I was doing. And so it forced me to come up with this idea of, what I'm really doing is helping people live a more fulfilling life through health and fitness. And that really became the crux of everything I've done for since that point. I've really tried to help people live a more fulfilling life. So whatever that looked like. So typically as a strength and conditioning coach or a trainer, you get a client and they want to lose 10 pounds. They want to get better at a sport. But we don't necessarily get into understanding why they want to do that. And what I noticed, especially in bodybuilding, is you end up dealing with some pretty deep-rooted issues, and you're providing very surface level solutions to those problems. And that partly contributes to why people will lose, say, 10 pounds, gain it back, try to lose 10 pounds again, gain back 15. And it becomes this issue where you're never actually, accomplishing your goals, because quite frankly, you're not actually solving the deep-rooted issues that person is having. And so that's really what I wanted to take up. That was kind of the challenge I gave myself with my strength and conditioning business was, how can I really solve these problems for these individuals? So over the years, I've worked with like several psychologists about how to go about this and kind of provide better solutions. And I'm doing it all through the avenue of health and fitness. So that's essentially what I'm doing now. Not to lose sight of the animation stuff. I do a lot of animation as well, and that has always been working sort of virtually. I worked in a few studios, but I prefer to work from home. I can work on my own schedule, and I'm far more productive as well doing that. So I basically had these sort of two avenues that I've been moving through, and just trying to provide the best possible solution for whatever that problem might be. So after that, so I had a fairly successful business going. I had a really good relationship with the gym that I was operating out of. When we do start to open up, everybody should go check out Fitness Unlimited. I'm extremely thankful for that gym. It's in Maple Ridge. They really provided me with a lot of opportunities, kept my overhead incredibly low, to the fact where we really just had a gentleman's agreement, and I was sort of running this business that was quite lucrative for myself. So check them out when they reopen for sure. Going through that, I had this business running, and then I realized that if I really wanted to maximize the amount of people that I could help, I needed to learn more of the big box operations, how to manage large teams and that kind of thing. So I started working at another facility on top of what I was already doing. So I was putting in like 15, 20-hour days. They were really long days, but I was learning a lot. And that was really the idea behind it, was to gain as much information as I could about how to manage a team. So then you're probably, a lot of people wonder how I ended up moving from Vancouver to, I'm currently in Saskatchewan, literally in the middle of nowhere. And so what happened was a girlfriend from like 12, well, it's probably 15 years ago now, but at that point it was about 10, 12 years ago, had messaged me on Facebook, and we reconnected, and then we started dating, doing the long distance thing. And then one day she just said, look, I booked a one-way ticket. I'm going to fly out there. We're packing your stuff and you're moving out here with me. And I was like, okay. So it was a lot easier for me to move out there or out here than it was for her to move to BC. So moved out to Saskatchewan. Basically, that forced me to do virtual training, which is one of the things that I do a lot of now, is this online training. Basically all of my clients who I was training in person went online. I knew what so I had done some research. I knew kind of what the drop-off rate might be. So I knew I had a bit of a time frame to work with. So it was a huge challenge at first. I started working in a few different gyms, just trying to do personal training, and it didn't really work out because, hours and that kind of thing it did not suit what we were trying to accomplish in creating this sort of family. So I ended up applying for a management position, which is where I was at prior to the shutdown. And the purpose behind that was I really wanted to understand how to manage teams and see if I could see if the system that I created was scalable to managing different teams. And so this was kind of a good sort of litmus test for that. So that's kind of where I was going into the shutdown. I was an assistant manager with a company called Good Life Fitness. They're one of the largest gym companies in the world that isn't franchised. They might be the largest. I don't know. But they're not franchised. They've got like 450 gyms across the country, 100% Canadian owned. And they've done a lot of really good things for their employees as well. So that's kind of where I've been at. Going into the shutdown here, I spent a lot of time trying to maximize the virtual training and the online stuff. And that's kind of what I've been doing for the last few years. Uh, yeah, so career's going well. I'm still doing a lot of animation. So again, I was super excited actually when the shutdown occurred and all these all these studios ended up pivoting to an online system. So I'm really excited about that. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity there, and it's going to be interesting coming out of the quarantine and kind of coming up with reopening strategies. So I guess the last thing that I have to talk about is kind of going into the future. Kind of got into that a little bit. The big news for me is that I'm expecting my first baby in early to mid October. Currently making this video, we're 17 weeks pregnant, so that's going to be really exciting. And I think that's pretty much sums up what I wanted to go over today. So a bit of a continuation from yesterday. I think this one was far more successful. It looks like everything is working well. So I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to be doing these probably every morning, Monday through Friday. If you, like I said at the beginning, if you'd like to come on and we can talk about, health, fitness, that industry. If you happen to be running a small business, I'd love to know what your reopening strategies are, or just how the shutdown affected your business and sort of how you managed to get through that. I'd love to talk to you about that. And then again, if you're in the animation industry, for sure, I want to talk to you. So send me a message, DM me, whatever, get a hold of me somehow through any one of these social media platforms. And yeah, I'd love to talk to you. So I think I will stop there before I start rambling. If you're interested in doing personal training and that kind of thing, send me a message as well. I can send you over to my website. It's Miski, like my last name spelled there with an SC at the end of it, .com. The SC stands for Strength and Conditioning. All right, you guys who watched this all the way through, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I'm on Facebook. You can find me just under my name, Ryan Miski, there. I'm streaming this to YouTube. Not that I've done anything on YouTube. Twitter as well. So my handle is I can actually probably throw this up somewhere. So Twitter is at RM1Miski. So there is my Twitter. And you can find me on Instagram as well under rmiskiman. So check me out there, give me a follow, and I'll be producing a lot more content in the next few days, as well as going into next week and whatnot. So thanks for watching, and I hope you guys all have a great day. Thanks.